Good day, and thank you for watching. If you are renting a property in California, there is one issue that creates more landlord-tenant conflict than many people realize: guests. Because what starts as someone staying for a few days can quickly turn into disputes involving leases, occupancy, eviction issues, and even claims of tenancy rights. Let's start with the basics. Most rental agreements contain terms regarding occupancy and guests. These terms may limit how long guests can stay or require landlord approval for additional occupants. Now, here's the key: there is often a major legal difference between a temporary guest and someone who may be considered an occupant or tenant, and determining where that line exists can become complicated. Now, here's where many tenants make a mistake. They assume that because they are the renter, they can allow anyone to stay indefinitely without consequences. But long term guests can create lease violations, overcrowding concerns, or disputes with landlords. Now, let's talk about what factors may become important: how long the person stays, whether they receive mail at the property, whether they contribute financially, keep belongings there, or present the property as their residence. These details may later become relevant. Now, let's discuss another issue: unauthorized occupants. Some landlords discover additional people living in the property who were never screened, approved, or included on the lease. And that often becomes the beginning of larger disputes. Now, let's talk about communication. One of the biggest problems in guest related disputes is lack of clarity. Tenants assume arrangements are temporary. Landlords believe lease terms are being violated. And over time, tensions escalate. Now, here's another important point: guest disputes often become more serious when relationships break down. Former partners, friends, relatives, roommates. What begins as a temporary arrangement can quickly turn into arguments about who has rights to remain in the property. Now, let's discuss another common misunderstanding. Some people believe that if someone is not listed on the lease, they automatically have no rights. But occupancy disputes can become legally complicated depending on the facts and circumstances. Now, let's talk about mail and residency indicators. Receiving mail, changing identification documents, registering vehicles, or using the address for official purposes may later be used to argue residency or occupancy. Now let's discuss another issue: short-term guests versus long-term stays. A weekend visitor is very different from someone living in the property for months, and lease agreements often contain specific language addressing these situations. Now let's talk about noise and conduct issues. Additional occupants or extended guests may increase complaints involving parking disturbances, property damage, or overcrowding, and those issues can create additional lease disputes. Now here's where many people make another mistake. They rely entirely on verbal arrangements. No written understanding, no communication, no documentation. And later, everyone has a different version of what was agreed to. Now let's discuss another important issue: subletting. Some guest situations evolve into informal subletting arrangements where money is exchanged or space is rented without landlord approval, and that can create major lease and legal complications. Now, let's talk about children and family situations. Family emergencies, caregiving arrangements, and temporary support situations sometimes create occupancy changes that become more complicated over time. And emotional circumstances can make these disputes especially difficult. Now, let's discuss landlord concerns. From a landlord's perspective, additional occupants may affect insurance, liability, property wear, utilities, and overall management of the property. That is one reason lease occupancy terms exist. Now, let's talk about enforcement. When occupancy disputes escalate, landlords may issue notices alleging lease violations. And if disputes continue, those issues can potentially become part of eviction proceedings. Now, let's discuss another misconception. Some tenants believe occupancy rules are never enforced until suddenly they are. And by that point, the dispute may already be escalating legally. Now, let's talk about evidence. Guest disputes often involve text messages, photos, surveillance footage, witness statements, mail records, utility usage, or social media evidence. Small details may become important. Now let's discuss another issue: safety and liability. Additional occupants may affect safety concerns, emergency access, parking availability, and responsibility for damage to the property. Now let's talk about strategy. Clear communication early often prevents larger disputes later. Understanding lease terms, addressing concerns before they escalate, and documenting agreements can reduce confusion. Now let's discuss emotional realities. Housing disputes involving friends, family, or relationships are rarely just legal issues. They often involve personal stress, financial pressure, and emotional conflict, and that can make decisions more difficult. Now let's look at the bigger picture. Guest and occupancy disputes sit at the intersection of property rights, lease agreements, and practical living realities. And small misunderstandings can quickly become major legal disputes if not handled carefully. Finally, let's talk about expectations. Not every guest issue leads to eviction or litigation, but ignoring occupancy concerns or assuming rules do not apply can create serious problems over time. Understanding the difference between guests, occupants, and tenants is critical. In conclusion, guest related disputes in California rentals can quickly evolve into complicated legal and practical problems involving lease terms, occupancy rights, and landlord tenant conflict. Understanding your lease, communicating clearly, and documenting arrangements can make a major difference in avoiding escalation. If you are dealing with occupancy disputes, unauthorized guest claims, or landlord tenant conflicts involving residency issues, understanding your rights and responsibilities is extremely important. Call us at 888 6582. I'm Vince Davis, and we are all in this together.